Hello all and welcome. We are officially on the air and you are tuned in to the Planet of Horror, where we cover your worst nightmares. So this is my first ever episode of this podcast and I'm starting off strong. This first one is a hell of a case. But before I dive in, a disclaimer. No disrespect is meant to anyone involved in these cases, and I'm purely compiling facts I've researched online. I would say this episode covers a lot of graphic content, such as rape, torture, murder, and if any of this kind of thing is triggering for you, please stop the podcast or video now. So let's dive in. In this episode, I will be talking about Jamie Reynolds, a man that was dubbed a potential serial killer after being caught for murdering a girl named Georgia Williams, aged only 17. He only killed one person, but it was so horrific, the courts had no doubt he would do it again given the opportunity. Oh yeah, it was that bad. The murder happened on the 26th of May 2013. Now, I'd picked this case for my first episode because I actually went to college in Wellington, and I would even pick up my snacks at the shop where this man used to work. It's so scary how close you can be to someone that dangerous and not even know it. Reynolds is 23, working at a local shop/petrol station in Wellington, and so did Georgia. This is where they became friends. Wellington isn't that big of a town, so they already knew each other. Reynolds actually went to school with Georgia's older sister. He would come across lonely and lost to her, a bit on the edge of everything. Georgia would feel sorry for him and try her best to include him in her social circle. And this is just how Reynolds wanted it. Just down the street from Reynolds' house lived Georgia, with her mum, Lynette, her dad, Steve, who was a local police officer, just to note, and her older sister. Now, her parents knew of Reynolds. They knew he was friends with Georgia. They knew he went to school with their oldest daughter. But that was it, really. They would have minimal interactions with him when they would go into the shop, but they had no good or bad thoughts about him. They thought he was well dressed, but quiet, and seemed relatively normal. Reynolds liked Georgia, really liked Georgia. He would even ask her out on a few occasions, to which Georgia turned him down, wanting to remain friends. We know this because Georgia would ask her family advice on how to turn him down, saying she wanted to remain friends and that she felt sorry for him, but she didn't want anything more than that. And I think Reynolds felt in control because of this too. He wanted her to feel sorry for him. He could manipulate situations to how he wanted them this way. Reynolds wasn't going anywhere in his life, and he wanted more. He wanted to be this professional photographer, but he needed a portfolio. So he asks Georgia for help, asking her to be part of a photo shoot, making out as if it's this group project he's organising and asking her friends to also be a part of. But he's lying. He isn't asking anyone else. But Georgia doesn't know this at the time, so agrees, wanting to help her friend. Sunday, May 26th, 2013. Georgia has a busy week at college ahead, but she's enjoying a Sunday evening in with her family. Her dad finishes work and got home about 4:30. Because the weather is so great, they decide to have a family barbecue. Even her grandparents are over. It's all very wholesome, and I'm sure very sad for them now. This is the night she's agreed to go over to Reynolds' house. Her family want her to stay in. Her mum tries to talk to Georgia, and she said she could see Georgia didn't really want to go, but felt obligated, and knew she wouldn't have time the rest of the week. So Georgia got herself ready. Her and her dad had a nice exchange at the door about how nice she looked. She headed out about 7:30, and up the street, only 10 minutes to Reynolds' house. That was the last time the Williams family would ever see Georgia again. And they did everything right. They knew where she was going. They knew who she would be with. They thought, like Georgia, that other people would be there. Plus, she was only 10 minutes up the street. You really don't expect something to happen that close to home. But Reynolds hasn't invited anyone else over to the house, and his parents are away on holiday, so the two of them are alone. Reynolds is believed to have murdered Georgia through method of hanging her between the hours of 9 p.m. and 10 p.m. We'll get into the gruesome details later because it is pretty bad. Just as a side note on this case, and I'm sure you'll see it too, what really irritates me is just how smart Jamie Reynolds seems to think that he is, yet he kills a police officer's daughter and thinks he's not going to be caught for that. Like something so obvious, and a person that he knows, and a person that literally lives on his street. Like, that is just so stupid. So it gets to 10:30, and Georgia's parents are obviously concerned. She hasn't come home, so her mum sends her a text, and she actually gets a reply, saying, "Oh, I've left with some friends. I'm going to be out for a while. I'll see you later. XXX." This text reassures her parents, and they head to bed at this point. But we know this text couldn't have come from Georgia. Police put her time of death between 9 and 10, and the text was sent at 10:30, meaning Reynolds sent this text on Georgia's phone to her parents. Sicker than that, he signs off the text with 3 X's, just like Georgia normally does. It was the way she signed off all of her messages to her family. It means, "I love you, Mum, Dad, Sister." So Reynolds must have looked through her messages, studied how she messages, and it shows a lot of planning and thought on his end. This wasn't a heat of the moment thing for him. Monday, May 27th, 2013, 6 a.m. Georgia's parents wake up and are worried Georgia hasn't come home. They knew she was going to stay out late, but didn't expect her to stay out all night. Her mum sends her another text, and doesn't get a reply till 7:30 a.m. At 7:30, she gets a text saying, "Hi Mum, I'm fine. I stayed over at a friend's. I'll see you later, but my battery is dying too." 2 spelled T-O-O, which is interesting, like it doesn't read right, and it's because it's on purpose. It's a cruel hint to Georgia being dead, like my battery is dying too. Georgia's dead as well. It's his way of trying to be in control and this mastermind. As the day goes on, Georgia's parents are becoming more concerned, but they know she has plans to go to a music festival with her friends, so they assume she's gone straight there. They don't really think they've got anything to worry about at this point. They think she's maybe being a rebellious teenager, like I'm old enough to do what I want kind of attitude. But they think she's safe, that she's with her friends. Her parents had booked her first driving lesson on the Tuesday morning the next day. They knew she was so excited to drive and wouldn't miss it for the world. They just kept telling themselves she would definitely be back by that night. But she didn't come home. They were now worried and mad. They tried texting her, ringing her, but her phone is switched off. Now they start ringing round her friends, and no one has heard from her. I don't know why they didn't call the police at this point, at the point that they realised her friends hadn't heard from her, but maybe they didn't get in contact with the particular friend that they thought she was with or something, or maybe they thought they would just wait till the morning because they knew, if anything, she would be back by that evening. Her dad spends the evening pacing around the living room, staring out the window, waiting for Georgia to come home. In his head, he's going to give her a mouthful when she gets in, He's so mad that she's made them worry this much. Tuesday, May 28th, 2013. Georgia's parents ring the police and report her missing after she fails to come home. The officer in charge of the case is a colleague of Georgia's father, Steve, and a close personal friend of the family's. This allows the case to move a lot quicker because a big question in missing persons is this behaviour normal for them? And he knew this behaviour was not normal for Georgia. She would always keep in contact with her family. She was very close to them. The police run a routine background check on Jamie Reynolds because this was her last known location, and what they find shocked them. I don't know what Reynolds' plan was really. Obviously they would come looking for her there. Yes, he sent a text to her parents saying that she'd left and that she'd gone to her friends. But of course, they weren't able to verify that, and of course they checked round her friends. So what did he really think was going to happen? It's so stupid really when he comes down to it. He was obviously always going to get caught. He wasn't really very smart, as much as he seems to think that he is. So what the police find in the routine background check is that Reynolds has a previous police caution back from 2008. He had lured a girl back into his house to work on a school project. Then once they were alone, he'd attacked her, trying to strangle her, but this young girl had managed to get away. This, of course, was a massive red flag to police, and they sent a load of police officers over to his house. And of course, it sounds familiar, doesn't it? This girl just managed to get away. Who's to say what would have happened if she didn't? He probably would have killed her too. It's so sad that he just got a police caution for it. Outside of Reynolds' house, police officers see no sign of life. One of the officers calls Steve Williams, Georgia's dad, and tell him they're outside and that they're going to put the door through to gain access. Now, as a police officer himself, he knows straight away this isn't a good sign. They don't normally take such drastic action, especially this early on. He's worried at what they found out or what they know. The family are also only down the street, so they're watching all these police cars go by their house and up to Reynolds's. So this must have been horrible for them to watch, and it must have been so worrying for them. Once the police are inside, they see no sign of Jamie Reynolds or Georgia Williams. They begin seizing items from the house and searching for any clues of their whereabouts. The investigation now turns into a manhunt for Jamie Reynolds. West Mercia Police, which is the local police in the area, search his job. No sign. Then they begin checking vehicles. Bingo. They find a van belonging to Reynolds' dad is missing. They launch a countrywide appeal for any information on the location of this van. 2:30 a.m. Wednesday, May 29th, 2013. West Mercia Police find the missing van, 280 miles away, outside a budget hotel in Glasgow, Scotland. Jamie is taken in by local police, and because they are trying to act quickly and potentially save Georgia, the West Mercia Police put in for an urgent interview and take Reynolds to a police station in Glasgow. He's asked one question: where is Georgia Williams? Reynolds would reply, I don't know. At this point, Jamie Reynolds is arrested and brought back to Shropshire. I don't know. Seriously, dude? You just fled nearly 300 miles for no reason. You just happen to be here in Scotland. Yeah, man? In a van that you stole? Taking a vacation, are you? Why are you running then? Oh, he's just so stupid, but then thinks he's so smart. It is so irritating. 5:30 a.m. Police officers were sent over to Georgia's family's house. Her mum would say right away she knew this wasn't good. High-ranking police officers don't knock on your door at 5 a.m. to give you good news. They broke down. Her dad was physically sick. Her dad shouts at the police, He's killed her, hasn't he? Which the officer confirms this may be the case. They don't know for sure yet that Georgia is dead. They're holding out hope she's not, but they're trying to prepare the family for the fact that she might be. Reynolds is still saying nothing. He's still claiming he has no idea where Georgia is. Police start going through the Reynolds house, searching for evidence or clues to the location of Georgia, and what they find is disturbing. The biggest piece of evidence was a memory card that Reynolds had wiped, but not good enough. The police were able to recover most of the content, and what they find is all the evidence they needed. There were lots of images of Georgia on there, some of her alive, then of her rope around her neck, then of her hanging, and then of her stripped naked and moved round the house. He'd taken photos of her in different sexual positions. He'd even gone as far as to have sexual contact with her body. This is just so gross. This was all after she was already dead as well. Like he'd moved her body around the house, taking photos. That is just so horrible. Like, how can you do that to someone? Some people out there are so sick. As the police continue, they find more. It becomes apparent that Reynolds' parents had tried to stop him gaining access to the internet, but while they were away on holiday, he'd installed his own routers and carried on. When looking into his internet history and computer content, it was filled with very violent pornography. Thousands of videos and pictures, to be exact. Like, this boy had a problem. They also found 40 fictional stories that Reynolds had written about killing, torturing, and sexually assaulting females, and they all seemed to be about girls that he knew. This was very disturbing. Jamie Reynolds was interviewed many times by police as they gathered this evidence, but he refused to say anything. He's still claiming that he doesn't know anything about Georgia's location. Officers would say he was very emotionless when interviewing him. He just wanted to play games and be in control, that he kind of got off on the whole situation, that they needed him. And this is what I mean about him being irritating, that he thinks he's so smart. Like, he thinks that the police need him, that if he doesn't say anything, then they won't get anywhere, which isn't the case because he's left plenty of evidence about. Like, they can get there on their own, but it's just so irritating that he thinks that he's in control here when he really isn't. Without Reynolds cooperating, they decide to put together a timeline of his whereabouts, from when they knew him and Georgia were together alone in the house to when they arrested him in Glasgow. The day after Georgia's disappearance, the police find CCTV footage of Reynolds filling up his dad's van at a local petrol station in Shropshire. It's believed Georgia's body is in the back of the van. I'll show you that footage now. Like, do you see how casual that body language is? And the dude has a dead body in the back of the van. Like, how? How? He then drives 60 miles to Wrexham in North Wales, where he stops and is caught on CCTV again in a cinema, where he oddly goes to watch a movie while he leaves George's body in the van outside. He goes to watch the same movie that he'd asked Georgia to go watch with him on a date, in his sick way of being like, I've won. Dude, you could quite easily take another girl, post some selfies together, make her jealous, anything else. You don't have to kill someone. And then having the thought process of being like, oh yeah, I'm going to go watch that movie now. how can you sit there in a movie and like watch it and enjoy it when you've got a dead body outside? Like, the boy is not well. After this, the trail goes cold in terms of Reynolds being caught on camera. But remember, West Mercia put out an appeal to the public on any information on the location of the stolen van. Well, some people had come forward to police reporting that they'd helped Reynolds on a mountain pass in North Wales when his van had got stuck. These people led local Welsh police to that location, and unfortunately, when officers got there, they found the body of Georgia Williams naked and in the woodland. Jamie Reynolds was now officially charged with the murder of Georgia Williams. Even though Jamie Reynolds has been charged, he's still not done playing games. He refuses to put in a plea to the court of whether he's guilty or innocent. He's still trying everything he can. They have to wait till all the psychology assessments have been completed, and this is basically to assess whether he's fit to stand trial. And he is assessed to be fit to stand trial in the end. But even then, he still waits right up till the court date. This tortures the Williams family, because this whole time they don't know whether they're going to have to sit through a full trial or not. And especially in this case, with the particular evidence of the videos and the pictures, would you really want to sit through hours of court for that? No, nobody would. 2nd of December 2013, Staffordshire Crown Court. Jamie Reynolds stands trial. He stands up in court and it's 50-50 what he's going to plea. Georgia's family would say he was very much playing the lost boy act to try and gain sympathy. Reynolds puts in a plea of guilty at the last minute. The trial brought to light a lot. Just how disturbed Jamie Reynolds was. Reynolds had been watching violent pornography for years. Since age 14, he'd written fictional stories about how he would murder women he knew. Notably, one of these stories was actually titled Georgia Williams, and it was said to pretty much be a script for what he actually did, which shows he was planning it, and also that he probably would have completed the other stories given the opportunity. He probably would have gone down the list, which is very scary. Photographs of girls he knew were also found, defaced, with ropes drawn around their necks. The court was also given a detailed account of what he actually did to Georgia. The whole thing was horrific. But the trial also highlighted how much it could have been prevented, how much authorities had failed and let Reynolds fall through the system. Reynolds had previously attacked a girl in 2008 and he was only given a police caution. He was even referred to CAMS, which is the NHS Youth Mental Health Team. Assessments were done. He was even assessed to be a high risk to the public, with one doctor reporting he was a high risk due to now seemingly acting on his sexual fantasies, but still, no action was taken back then. At the end of the trial, Reynolds was found guilty and given life in prison. He was told he would never be released. The judge described him as a potential serial killer, which is reflected in his sentence. Jamie Reynolds is one of the youngest in the UK to ever be given this sentence, and it's only given in rare situations where there is a belief that no matter how much therapy, no matter how much rehabilitation opportunities are given to the person, that they will never be fit to live in society. It's basically our version of the death sentence, since that's not a thing in the UK, but at least it's the highest thing that he could have gotten here anyway. Reynolds is sent to Wakefield High Security Prison. In 2014, he tried to appeal his life sentence. His lawyer said his guilty plea should have been given more weight during the sentencing, basically meaning that they should have gone easier on him because at least he was admitting what he'd done, even though he didn't help at all during the investigation, and most of the way through was claiming that he didn't know where Georgia was. But yeah, at the trial, when you had no choice, when there was so much evidence against you, you were going to be found guilty no matter what you pleaded. But yeah, then you should have been given less of a sentence because at least you're admitting to it. No, dude, no. Which the Court of Appeal agreed and ruled there was no basis on which it can be properly argued that a whole life sentence was not required. Basically telling them to F off. There's no chance this dude did not deserve his sentence. So Reynolds is in prison, and still is to this day, as far as I'm aware, as updates go. He's still in Wakefield Prison, still under a life order, will never be released. But the story is not over yet, and there's still one big question that remains. Why didn't anyone stop Reynolds before he got to this point? How did this end up happening? George's parents fought for answers and for people to be held responsible. In 2015, a massive case review into police, NHS and social workers was launched. The aim to understand how Jamie Reynolds fell through the cracks despite its history and red flags, and how the system can be changed for the future to stop anything like this ever happening again. It was found after Reynolds attacked the young girl in 2008 and was given the police caution. The investigating officer was said to have a narrow perspective and seemed to be aimed at ensuring a speedy resolution. And you might have been asking yourself through this episode, where were Reynolds' parents? Well, this report also highlighted that Reynolds' parents actually expressed their concerns to police about the pornography he was watching. They're the ones that told them that he'd been watching it since he was 14. They also later gave police a hard drive of the material he was watching back in 2008, but the police failed to re-interview him after the initial attack. Reynolds agreed to be referred to the youth offending team, but the officer assigned to his case didn't seem to do anything other than make him write a written apology to the victim that he attacked. The officer even assessed him as being a high risk to the public in their final report, but they failed to share this report with police or the mental health team. Reynolds back then was found to have photos of girls that he knew that he went to school with that he'd defaced and drawn ropes around their necks. And even though 2 social workers were tasked to inform 2 of the victims in the photos, they didn't. One of those girls were believed to have been Georgia's best friend. So, if she'd have known, maybe she could have warned Georgia. And worth noting, Reynolds was allowed to keep those photos as well, which is pretty sick, he definitely should have had those taken off him. This was their biggest criticism, from the public point of view anyway, is the public understood that you couldn't arrest somebody before they'd actually done anything, but they could have informed families that Reynolds was being this way, was being this creepy towards their daughters, and maybe they could have warned them, they could have at least been more cautious, not gone anywhere alone with him. But then I do see it from the mental health perspective that you can't give that personal information out about a person, especially when they're struggling. But then if you're going to do that, you need to keep a closer eye on them. You can't let them fall through the system if they're assessed to be that high risk to the public. Then in 2010, the NSPCC formally closed Jamie Reynolds' case after becoming frustrated at his non-compliance. That same year, in 2010, Reynolds purposely rammed the back of a young woman's car with his own after she'd rejected him. But the police at the time didn't run a background check on Jamie Reynolds, so it wasn't linked in his pattern of behaviour and no action was taken again, which it kind of does show a pattern that he's becoming angry at women that reject him. That's now 2 things as well. One in 2008 and one in 2010. I wonder if when they did the routine background check on Jamie Reynolds, that the 2010 one came up as well as to the 2008, and that's the reason they were so quick to like ram his door through, because they could immediately see the pattern of behaviour. Because it doesn't mention in articles that I've read or documentaries that I've watched whether the police saw those two things at the same time, or whether it was only uncovered in this report afterwards when everything was being put together. Overall, 8 different agencies were involved in Jamie Reynolds' case. The case review highlighted there was a lot of confusion, and authorities took a very uncoordinated approach when it came to dealing with Jamie Reynolds. This unfortunately resulted in them failing, letting Jamie Reynolds fall through the cracks, which resulted in Georgia Williams dying. Georgia's family told one newspaper, "Having lost Georgia to pure evil, we cried when we read this report and the failings of all the agencies involved, because it was so obvious that Reynolds was not, if not one already, a murderer in the making. Georgia's death could have been prevented." West Mercia police apologised to Georgia's family. West Mercia police did give a statement to one newspaper saying that 4 officers were under disciplinary meetings over this case, but also the article stated the highest the officers would receive is like final written warnings. They wouldn't even be fired over it. So it didn't seem like anyone really got punished over this. But it did create a lot of change in the way that young people are handled within the mental health system, how red flags can be taken more seriously. After all this, Georgia's family obviously will never be the same again. They set up a trust in her name, which I'll leave linked below for anyone that wishes to donate. It helps young people empower themselves through outdoor activities and helps the local community in Shropshire. The family are still very active in the community and the trust, and they say having something positive to focus on is a great way to remember their daughter. I do respect this family a lot because they went through so much, and their parents still went on and fought for years after Jamie Reynolds had gone to prison to get this case review through, and for people to seriously look at the way the system works to prevent this kind of thing from never happening again. Like, they really took action in changing the system for the better. It must have took such strength because they'd already been through so much. And they did it in the end. This case report was launched, all these authorities were looked into, and their mistakes were highlighted. Phew! So that case was a bit of heavy salad, if I do say so myself. It was very sad, and I'm very sorry for anyone involved in that case. Didn't Jamie Reynolds just make you irritated in the fact that he would do these little things to make himself seem in control, but overall everything that he did was just so stupid? Like, out of everyone that you could have picked, a policeman's daughter, somebody that lived down the street from you, you think you won't be caught? You're obviously going to be caught, dude. But let me know what you think below. What do you think authorities should have done to stop Jamie Reynolds from doing this? Do you think they could have done anything? And let me know if there's anyone that you'd like me to cover in the future. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. I plan to be uploading once a week. I'll let you know on the day. I haven't quite sorted out my schedule yet, but hopefully it will be on Fridays. Over and out.